Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Monica H. Kang. Monica is the founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox, the author of Rethink Creativity, How to Innovate, Inspire, and Thrive at Work, and the host of two podcasts, Dear Workplace and Curious Monica. She is an internationally recognized expert in workplace creativity who facilitates culture transformation, leadership development, and team building in a way that is fun, actionable, and relatable. Monica provides consulting, training, facilitation, and keynote speaking to clients worldwide, including Fortune 500 companies, higher education institutions, government agencies, and nonprofits. She also supports organizations, professionals, and entrepreneurs through the InnovatorsBox Academy and the programs she co-creates with her strategic partners, including Adapt to Grow and Culture of Analytics. Monica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And I think I now know why I need summer vacation after hearing my own bio. Thank you.
You have such an extensive background. We're so excited to have you on.
We're so excited to have you on the show today, Monica, and we want to dive right deep into it. We want to hear more about your childhood, what created this hustle mentality that you started developing as an adult. Was it because your parents were hustlers? What was your childhood like?
To be honest, I don't think I knew the word hustle until very later in life. It turned out I was hustling, but I didn't know what that word existed. And part of going back to your comment about childhood, I'm so glad this is one place that you all asked this question, because honestly, during COVID, I've been reflecting a lot more in all the nuances of why I got to think and see certain ways. And really one area that bottomed down was because two parts of experience I've always had throughout my upbringing that was consistent, which I guess maybe translated to us. So is one, I've often been in places where I got to experience inclusion and exclusion, which I think permits you then to think about, okay, because I knew how great it was to be included, I want to work hard to be included, but then not want to be excluded. And so that kind of like both joy and pain, I think because of the different experiences that I had growing up was something, because growing up both in the States and in Korea and also lived in Europe. And two, also just really having the experience of, and grateful that my parents really honored, love and care. And now that growing up and having, and speaking with more Asian American friends, how unique and grateful I am is that they grew up always saying, I love you, very touchy and feely actually, and still am. And I think because of that, my communication value of why it's so important to speak about certain things, and hence maybe that is part of the hustle, is like, if you have something on your mind, why are you waiting it? Like express it, who says when is the next time you can express, whether including simple statements as I love you and thank you is of importance. So that's kind of what comes to mind when you ask me that question, which might not have why you thought of it.
I love that. Yeah, I love that your family emphasized a lot on love and care. I think that's very rare, especially in Asian households, because my parents never really said I love you to me, and they showed me love and affection in very interesting ways and very Asian ways. Like my mom would cut a bowl of fresh fruits for me, or my dad would like fill up my gas tank for me. And those are just like the kind of ways that they show affection, right? Talking about just like our career choices, right? I think a lot of Asian parents like push us to go into conventional paths to success, like be a doctor, be a lawyer. And I think most of the times it's not to say that they are just trying to force things on us. It's just that they care about us, right? Because they went through such like unstable and uncertain times where they just want us to be stable. So I want to know, because they emphasize so much on love and care, did they also have like a set, path for you? Did they like want you to become a certain role and go into a certain industry? Or were they more like free flowing? They just wanted you to do what you loved?
This is how we know it's an Asian show, right? We can talk about this and it's not weird.
Yeah, sure.
And I appreciate you raising that, because I think those are maybe perhaps because I grew up geographically in two different locations. I think my parents brought both. So some parts, they're very conservative because they still lived most of their life still in Korea. So there are certain things that some of my Asian American friends like, Monica, like, why would your parents say that? Or like, why would they approach in a certain way? They're like, is that too considerate? I'm like, no. This is very standard in Korean culture where their norm is being built, but they would probably approach certain things that would be very different than some of my other Asian American friend upbringing because they're not living here as well. And so I think because of that, both the expression of love and your comment about career has evolved. Yes, I've received both spectrums of like, that sounds crazy, don't do that, as well as this is what your typical career should be. And so the safest round of what I thought would be cool, but also honoring their work was one in diplomacy. And that is part of the very reason why I always thought for a very long time that I wanted to be a diplomat, working at State Department, being able to represent your country, solving all these complex nuances. Yes, it fits the Asian profile of checkmark, like cool job title that your son and daughter could have. I didn't get to accomplish the law process. I tried LSAT, it was horrible. Don't ask me on numbers. So I told my parents, like, don't ask me to be a lawyer, but I'll figure out the diplomacy piece because I think I like people. I like work with different things. You get to travel around the world. But then getting to the whole other piece of other lens, that was a whole other question. But yeah, especially in regards to expertise, when I went into, hey, I want to do this diplomacy, but build this expertise called nuclear weapon security. They were like, whoa, do you really need to think about that? I mean, what if North Korea is watching? Like, that doesn't sound safe. So yes, grew up with both.
Yeah, that's very relatable. I think, I was actually working in local government as well. And sometimes, they would, question and say like, oh, is it safe? Are they like having access to our information? I think it's just like the Asian way to like think because it's hard for them to trust a lot of things when they're immigrants and coming to a new, fresh country with like no knowledge of like what's going on, the government, like how they act. So very, very relatable.
Yeah, I do want to refer back to earlier what you said about, hustling because you wanted to feel like you belong to something greater, and I want to dive deep into that because your situation is very unique. You grew up in two different countries, two different continents, Korea and the United States. Like, how did that affect your own personal Asian identity? How did that affect your own Korean identity as well? Because I hear from my Korean friends that in Korea, if you're not like from Korea, actually, they look at you sort of differently too. So I feel like you're dealing with two different societies with two different expectations. How did you manage that internally? And how did you feel growing up too? Like, who did you see yourself when you looked inside the mirror each morning?
Thank you for asking that question, Brian. I mean, this is part of the conversation of why I think I was looking forward to speaking with both of you and just having this honest place, because I wish I had somebody back then telling me that it was okay throughout all those moments. Being born in DC, I actually am DC born, growing up in the States and then moving to Korea, I was weird. I looked obviously ethnically Korean and Asian, but I was completely opposite, did not follow any of the rules, actually did not speak Korean at all. So my parents would share how I would go to school and apparently understood because I'll still say, this is what my teacher said is homework. I'll do homework and then I'll play and then I'll do these things. So I did my homework, but apparently when they spoke with the teachers, they said for a full year, I did not say a single word. And for those who know me, it's very hard for me to believe that because I do talk a lot. Because I didn't feel like I could fit in, because I couldn't be my cheerful spirit of who I was, all the personalities that I developed when I was growing up in the States. But then, I got to understand about Korea. I got to really appreciate, learn the history, did my elementary, middle school, I had built a lot of friends. And then by the time I was looking into studying back in the States, I realized, okay, well, technically US is my home country. Let me learn a little bit more. And as I came here, I realized, wait, now I'm conflicted again with this whole identity because now I'm Korean, but I'm not Korean because obviously I'm American. And so I'm international, but I don't really I do get all the Disney songs because I grew up with it. So that's where like all my other Asian friends from Asia were like confused. And yet I didn't get all the inside jokes. Back then, mom joke was the thing. And I was so mad every time somebody tried to pull that out, even in a girls' school. And I'm like, how disrespectful that is. It's like, Monica, just calm down. It's a joke. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Joking about your parents is such an offense. Like, you do not do that ever. So that kind of conflict continued. And so I realized only in hindsight how traumatized I think I was throughout my life of feeling I'm Korean, but not Korean enough. I'm American, but not American enough. I think it was only by grad school, which is like literally only just a few years ago, I mean, within the past 10 years, that I felt really more American and was able to own up my identity. But throughout, I had people always calling out and saying like, well, I don't know where to really put you in a box, because you're either too American to be Korean and you're too Asian to follow an Asian American. And so no parties actually invited me. So I always kind of felt like the odd kid in the table, which I think over time permitted me to gain the strength of the eye to understand the outsider perspective and the insider. And hence one of my core strengths now of really creating that safe room, because I knew what it felt like to be on both sides. And so I'm grateful to answer this question publicly now, because I just wish somebody said how normal that could be. And to know that if you just feel like the kid outside the table right now, it's okay. Just get to know who you are more. And you being who you are is the secret sauce, not what people say you should be. But I didn't know back then.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being vulnerable. I mean, it takes a lot of reflection to kind of talk upon this subject, because it's not easy. It is in some ways an insecurity that you probably felt most of your life. And thank you for sharing that, because there's a lot of people out there that probably feel the same way, even to their adulthood still feel the same way. And I really like the fact that you ended the statement by saying that you want to create a safe place for everyone to feel like they belong. And that's like almost like the genesis of Asian Hustle Network, because I think historically I always saw myself as an outsider to everything and anything, because as I was growing up, I was always labeled as like this either too out there or too weird or too everything, So it takes a lot of deep reflection to realize that, hey, like, this is a cool trait. We can be cool. And I can honestly say to you, Monica, as you're sharing your story, like, that's a really cool story that you shared. Like I think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that I kind of wish we shared your experience of living in Korea, living in the US. That's such a cool story to share now. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Monica. And I think a lot of people can resonate, a lot of Asians can resonate with your story, right? And I personally feel the same way. My motherland is in Hong Kong, and whenever I go back to Hong Kong, I can't speak the language that well, right? So, and they can tell that I'm not from there. And I don't feel as welcomed as I should, right? Even though I am Chinese. But when I'm in America, I also feel like, I'm Asian, I'm an outsider. And so I think a lot of us deal with that identity crisis, like, where do I actually belong? Where does it actually feel like home, right? You bring up a really great point that, like, sometimes we just don't have that creative side to us, and we are not able to express ourselves in the right way if we're not in an environment where we can thrive, right? And if we are in an environment where we can thrive, then that allows us to, be ourselves, express ourselves in a more meaningful and effective way, right? And, I know that you were in diplomacy and in public policy, and I want to know, like, what that experience was like for you. Like, I know that you loved doing what you did, but did you feel like you were in an environment where you can thrive? Because personally, like, I was in tech, and, mostly tech, it's like predominantly white male. And I think that transition from like tech to Asian Hustle Network, I felt like I could thrive a lot more in Asian Hustle Network, because I didn't feel like I was in an environment where I can thrive in tech. But want to hear from your experience on, like, what your experience was like in public policy, and how you kind of went through yourself finding your identity there.
No, thank you both for sharing that. I think, obviously, if you don't know Asian Hustle Network, you should at this point if you've been listening to the podcast. But one thing that you both hit me home was just the reason why, communities like what you both built for Asian Hustle Network. The reason why when there's, safe rooms like that it means so much is because it really is a core reminder to how people around you matters. And I think because of both my personal curiosity of just wanting to understand and like hang out and get to understand different perspectives from different people, I purposely loved putting myself in all these different rooms. Like I remember in college, I was so proud. Like, I figured out a way to attend this like really cool conference. It's called HPAIR. I think some of the people who might be listening is familiar. Harvard students run the program. And so it felt cool to be like among all these like diverse audience, both Asian and non-Asians, who just were passionate about making a difference in Asia political affairs. I'm like, whoa, that's so fun to nerd out. And I'm like only a college student. I just got into college. That's my proud moment. And all these people are like bragging about all these other things. So like, I'm just glad I'm around nerds. And that's kind of where I would answer to your first hence question about like what was my experience in government and public policy. It really struck me in that it wasn't just the work or the environment, it was really the people where it made me feel safe versus not. And honestly, at times backstabbing to realize. And I think the most hurtful one, because I've had it way back even in high school, I grew sensitive to thinking about, I want to be trusting, I am welcoming to people. But if you've had some moments where somebody burned bridges, you start to wonder, okay, is it me overthinking or is it really not safe? And in the government, one of the things, especially honestly in nuclear weapon security, is your security clearance. It's almost like a badge to show like how trustworthy you are in the government and the work that you do, and not really a judgment of the work capability and the talent that you have. And so that was one thing that I realized that I didn't really enjoy that way of being treated or judged, regardless of what my clearance level was and how some people had to feel a certain way. And because somebody who have lived and knew so many friends abroad, my security clearance took a little bit longer. So I felt what it was like to be treated like you're the one who can't walk into some of these meetings because you don't have the clearance, even though we're working on some of the same projects. And so that really stood out because at the same time, there were some colleagues and mentors who really just went out of their way. And whenever I stumbled, it was like, oh, Monica, this is actually how you would do it. Or like, don't worry, just call this person and this person will help me out. And I realized that, wow. So this same place that I could feel both love and frustration really all stems with people. And that's where I got then genuinely curious as I was relearning about the importance of mindset, that maybe this is not just the industry. Yeah, some people would say that governments are boring, but there's so many fun things in the government, honestly, which is the reason why I'm still in DC, and do hope more, exciting things in diplomacy. But I hope that hence a long way of saying why people really, really matter.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I definitely agree with you. I think that there's so much more to it than like the environment and the situation, the setting that you're in. The people have so much to do with it. And that I think that's why community means so much to us, right? And community helps us, feel alive and helps us feel like we're interconnected with each other. So definitely agree with you.
Yeah, that sort of is a really good segment to like what you're working on right now too. Because I think that a lot of things you do, it's like your podcast, your companies have to do with people. Can you quickly talk about like your transition to being an entrepreneur and what kind of spurred the moment where you're like, you woke up one day, you're like, this is what I want to do? What kind of mindset shift did you have to gain in order to make that decision that this is what you want to do in the future?
You absolutely cannot skip the, oh dear, how am I'm going to tell this to my parents.
Yes.
Because honestly, even working in nuclear non-proliferation, that was a whole process. And then saying that, wait, now you're transitioning, you spent all this grad school and work. But jokes aside, I think one thing now they do appreciate in between is just now how much now I can publicly talk about my work, which I couldn't much in the nuclear security realm. I think honestly, as a result, separate from the Asian joke aside, just human instinct wise, we're not really trained to take risk. So, Brian, to your question about how it instantly felt, I think when I had the aha moment that this needed to exist, it wasn't like step 2 is business. Step 2 was find a job. Okay, let's do the job hunt. Let's see what organizations are out there who's solving this. There must be somebody because it seems so needed. So I spent for a first good chunk of 4 to 5 months just researching, learning more what's out there because I was just curious. I did not think for a second, yes, want to build a company one day, but not at where I was. But I quickly realized every time I spoke with somebody, they're like, Monica, I don't think that exists. Like, maybe you should try something or like, just do something in between. And so then I started kind of playing that role of the facilitator organically without me realizing, because where I was, whether in events or community programming that I was part of, I would just volunteer and say, hey, can I help bring these people together? Let me create safe rooms. And before I realized, I really became that person who was the bridge builder. It was just doing that, not in diplomacy, but like across different industries and different networks, and recognizing the three visible gaps that I saw, which was one, not only how creativity seems so inaccessible if creativity is truly for all, why are only traditional artists, psychologists, and researchers talking about it? Like somebody who came from a very different background should be able to talk about it too, if it's really for all. And two, if it's really that helpful, well, why aren't we still having communities and conversation where everyone just shows up as us? Like, you know, Brian and Maggie shouldn't be like the person from this network. Like Brian should be Brian, like Maggie should be Maggie. Like we should feel like who we can be, and then happen to be all these other identities. And I felt like that kind of room didn't exist still. And I felt like that was a type of creative community that I really felt would help me and has helped when I was in those rooms. And three, also just making this tangible and fun. Like we honestly learn best when it's fun. None of us actually had ever enjoyed classes that was like super boring even now. So recognizing those with clarity, I'm like, let me explore what I could do. And so I remember 2015 December, like grateful that all these platforms apparently have amazing customer service, even during on holidays, to have fast customer feedback, to set up all these websites, vision, mapping out, and realizing that, hey, maybe I can start this thing called InnovatorsBox. Maybe this can be a start of something where I can just be the home for innovators to know that they're not alone. They don't have to be the strange ones. They can continue to hone their skills, build a community, and be part of something, but also know that they have more room to grow by meeting other diverse innovators like them, but are different. Because if we're only still in our circles, we're not growing and expanding enough. And so that's kind of really what led. And I still worked in my day job for 6 months until I left. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing. Out of curiosity, did you raise venture capital for your company, or did you bootstrap everything?
Bootstrap 100%.
Wow.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine the struggles that you went through.
Present tense. It never ends. I mean, anyone who says so, I mean, what version of the story are they sharing?
Hollywood version.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love what you're doing, and it just makes so much sense.
Thank you.
You're helping these organizations, around the world just leverage their creativity. You talk a lot about creativity, and it's so important for us to just like find our creative outlet, and helping them, unlock their talent, their innovation, and like just building these inclusive cultures within these organizations. And that takes a lot of hard work, right? But I think a lot of it comes from you yourself, Monica, and it takes a lot for you to actually take out your creative outlet and, express it with your business, express it into your work. So I want to know, like, how do you find creativity for yourself and in your own work, right? Like, what is your creative process like to make sure that you're putting out the best work for InnovatorsBox, because you're helping these organizations find their creativity. But what is your creative process like?
Yes. If I can't walk my own talk, then what does that mean? It's something that I really love being reminded of, because, I think often even among therapists and coaches, we joke about, we need more of that service of what we deliver. Mm-hmm. And I think this pandemic was a humbling time, honestly, Maggie. What you've asked me was something I realized I wanted to be even more intentional. So traditionally, I think even before the pandemic, I wanted to make sure I integrate play. And I think one segment I forgot to share out of the whole joke reference of, how the starting process was like for the business, because having been close to, being depressed, even close to suicidal, made me realize how important mindset of creativity is, led me to realize why I needed to start the business. Right. Hence, as a result, in everything I do, I try to make sure I never get to that point, is number one, because I think that prevents us from being creative. What that means is, in my day-to-day and in the work that I do, is this fun? Am I integrating play? Am I making this fun? And I know sometimes for folks who's listening will probably say, well, but Monica, like, I have work. Like this cannot be fun. And I'm going to challenge all of you to say, but you can choose to make it fun. Like, let's say you're working on an Excel sheet, like give yourself ownership and says, okay, it might be that Maggie, my supervisor, is going to say, Monica, need to get this done tomorrow. I'm like, okay, but she didn't say how I can get this done. Like maybe I'm going to get this done in one step, or I could do this in 10 other ways because I want to have it fun. I know how to do it one way, what Maggie told me, but I feel like there could be another way. And then Maggie's going to get the same result. She's going to say, okay, Monica's happy she got the result, but I had fun making it. And that's going to be happy for me, happy for Maggie and everyone else in the team. And that kind of ownership mindset was something that I realized is key, that I advise a lot of people, but what I do as well. And so even in small things as like when we schedule client meetings, I be intentional about how do I make this fun and empower my clients to understand meetings can be fun if you design it, including not scheduling meetings if you don't have to. That's part of all the fun. Don't try to book more meetings because you think you need, but you design it in a way that you make it fun. Right. And then hence celebrating it. I think that's also equally important. I think more informed of TV shows and movies than ever before. That's my other outlet. I've been taking more walks and looking forward to traveling again post-pandemic. But those are many ways. And again, that's the other thing, is that you want to have many outlets, not one, because you don't want to ever limit yourself. It's like saying that you only have one favorite food. No, please have many favorite foods, many favorite outfits, many favorite things that you like, because you want to have options, and hopefully many movies and books you like too.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I love that. And I think especially for a lot of Asians, the word hustle relates to us so much that we're always constantly thinking about hard work. We have to work hard or else nothing's going to get done. But we don't ever think about incorporating fun or play into our work, right? And
can I add one thing to that as a result? So I've learned this lesson, part of my competitiveness way back even in elementary school, and who knew that was a lesson I was going to remember now as an adult, is that there was I was one of the very few females who played soccer that like totally had all the other girls hate the few of us who did play soccer and hung out with all the guys. But the thing that I always like, I guess my unconscious competitiveness, and really took it to heart in the lesson I learned of, for those who are really looking at like thinking long-term, you have to not only work hard, you have to play hard. And there was this other girl who also played soccer, but somewhere in the way she was actually extremely good with soccer. So I was nowhere close to her skill, but she just like worked hard and played her. Like every other day she would get all the straight A's, but also like she would be like the hardest person who would play. Like every time you see her in school, she would be hanging out, either playing soccer, playing instrument, like just having fun, not doing anything and chilling. And I always wonder, like, that seems so unfair. Like, why would somebody who would have like just play and not do work get also all the grades? And like, I always used to like think in a very narrow mind of that, like, that's not fair. Like, I'm going to work harder. But, hence Maggie, that's why when you share that, I bring back that humbling memory and think about like, that was very naive of me, that yes, I think in society we had built such a hustle culture that work hard, but forgot the second sentence of play hard, because if we are working hard, we got to recharge even faster to want to be able to enjoy working instead of just only hard work, because now the next time you work hard, it's not going to be as fun and be able to do that. So just thought I'll add that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good example. And I think you bring a good point, because I think a lot of us, when we think about working hard and we don't incorporate fun, it does bring us into a depressive state, right? And I'm so glad, your outlook is so much better now and you're in a better place from before. And I think a lot of us, when we work so hard, we tend to wear out on ourselves. We tend to burn out, right? And we don't think about incorporating play or like having fun into our work, but that's really all it takes. We have to like kind of change our settings sometimes and make sure that we're also having fun while, completing the work that we need to do.
Yeah, you got to have fun with what you do. Otherwise, you don't enjoy it and you don't put the best efforts for it. And this podcast is a prime example of that. It is work, but we're having lots of fun, like hearing people's stories, sharing, amplifying all the lessons learned in their life. But there's one thing that you pointed out in your answer is your mental health. I think that is one thing that we don't talk enough, especially in entrepreneurship, about how lonely and depressing and stressful things can really be. There's not that many people they can talk to. You can talk to your parents and they'll look at you and be like, I told you to work a job. Or, or you talk to your friends who aren't in the hustle world and they don't quite understand what you're going through. And they try to give you advice that sometimes just make things worse. And it just makes you feel extra lonely that, you try to talk to other founders, but you're all going through your own struggles. And then you just feel like you're just causing them more trouble. So I think, how do you manage your mental health and your mental well-being? Because similar to you, I was a state of depression in my other adventures before Asian Hustle Network, where I seriously was staying up at night looking at the ceiling and be like, dang, no one understands me. What am I doing? And then at the time, Maggie didn't hustle yet. So then I couldn't really talk to her what I was going through. She's like, you got it. But sometimes you got it is not enough, It's like, okay, what do I got? I don't know, So I just want to touch base upon that because that really resonates with me a lot in the mental state and the mental health of being an entrepreneur. So how do you manage your mental state?
Resonate with so many different parts, from nobody gets me to I know they mean it out of good heart, but that's not really helpful. Don't say that, to wait, I just want to be understood. So it's that swing of different emotions. And I think a couple of different components to break that down is one, first, kind of really why it makes it so worth it. And hence the mental well-being is, honestly, including actually how I got to know both of you, if I didn't do entrepreneurship, I wouldn't have met all the amazing people and gained so much experience and lens of understanding of everything and anything. And so every time when things do get tough, I try to remember that, okay, take into perspective, where was I feeling just even a few years ago, a few months ago, the capacity in the heart, because there's so much challenge and growth, the lens of how you think about it is very different. And so as a result, hence number two, when you do meet people who get you, I think we learn to appreciate it more. I have a very close friend. We barely post pictures even online, but we know heart to heart, we got each other. And when we meet, we need at least 6 hours. 6 hours is too short when we catch up because there's just so much to catch up. And it's because we happen to be Asian American. We happen to be a female tech founder. And also, an entrepreneur who also was a non-entrepreneur before. And so there's a lot of nuances. And also we met when we were single. So there were a lot of nuances from personal, professional, just family, fun. We like to eat, we eat and check out different restaurants that we could relate. And we realized that we can't have this time with anyone else. And I think that's why we get to appreciate when we meet those people even more. But three, as a result, I think it's really, really important, regardless of where you're at. Maybe you're at a stage you're listening to this and you're like, hey, yeah, I resonate with all three of you. And I feel like I'm at a place I don't have somebody to talk to. Get curious to see who else perhaps is around your circle where maybe you could explore, would be number one, because you might be surprised. It might be that maybe they want to learn and support, but they don't know how. But two, most importantly, is actually go out and meet more people, because maybe you just haven't met them yet. I've met so many people before business. I have met 5 times more people than that point. So I know that we're only going to meet more people onward. So we need to take a proactive step. If you feel like your inner circle right now is not giving that refuel, you have to proactively reach out. And this goes back to, Brian, your question about the mental well-being was realizing in all these components, the action starts with me. I need to take the action of first realizing that I'm not happy. I need to take the action to figure out what would I want to do to be happier, to find those allies and do one at a time. So I had to permit myself to be comfortable attending all these events or community gatherings to find those people and know that, some of these events I might attend and I might not get along with anyone. And that's okay, because that's at least one place I've now checked the box and explored. Okay, I've tried it out. I know that's not the place. Let me try another network and keep going out, because sitting in the room, just looking at the ceiling and being stressed alone is not going to get there. And so now that I know all these other resources, such as coaching, therapy, being able to talk through different things is so key. And then having outlets like this, where you learn about other stories of people that you might never know, even just online, is really, really empowering. But number one, just really be the protagonist of your story. Own it up. And fourth, in that process, just one final tip I want to add, as somebody who became an entrepreneur, who was not an entrepreneur, is treasure your people who are not entrepreneurs as well. I think I've gone through the lessons of both, of going through the initial phase of like, none of my non-entrepreneur friends get me. Like, I'm so upset. Like, I feel like we can't be friends anymore. Honest, real talk. And I didn't mean harm. They didn't mean harm either, but it was just hard to like talk about things when you're not, you're worrying about like equity and like your team situation, and the other person's worrying about shopping and like where to eat next. I'm like, that's not the same conversation I'm having. But that's not why you were friends in the first place. I think remembering where your friendship lied, give your family, who might not know about what your business is, to get to know you more of the different lens. And don't stress out if they don't get it. That's, they didn't know what nuclear weapon was before too. So that's not why they love you and care for who you are as a friend. And so we need to also own up to those relationships and build together. Because if we shut our doors, that door is not going to open either, even if they try. So that's where I'll say in mental well-being, starting with you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Monica. That's very powerful, and I absolutely agree. It really just does take some understanding, and you're right. Like, that wasn't the reason why you were friends before, and there's a reason why there was a connection in the first place, right? Absolutely. So I do want to talk a little bit about InnovatorsBox. You have such an extensive and impressive list of companies, including just large corporations like Facebook, Citibank, Google as your clients for InnovatorsBox. How do you typically do your outreach, or do you have these companies reach out to you? I want to know like the process behind that.
Number one rule, always diversify your options in outreach. It would be the case. I think and over time, you'll probably know what works best for you. Initially, if you asked me this question even a year ago, I wasn't really sure because I only had a few stats. But now, as more year pass, we're seeing where the pattern is. And it's really coming, I think, from three consistent places. One, of course, referral always helps. Like those who have experience, who knows your work and why it's so unique, they will share with other friends. So always, number one, bring a best service to whoever you're serving already. They can be your number one fan. Let them be your number one fan and let them speak, especially for something like InnovatorsBox, where it took me a long time to even practice saying what we do, because at the end of the day, we do culture, leadership, team development. But sometimes for people, that means creative workshops. For others, it means executive coaching. For some, it means we're doing year-round culture development. And so really building that referral trust was key, but really hence focusing on those relationships to let them see that, speak of that value to others. But two, as a result, you want to be as visible and be available, and also hence not in the heart of marketing, but really true giving. And because I volunteered proactively, when I realized how much of a gap there was in Next Gen, in some of these women business networks, I proactively stepped up and played roles. And wanting to bridge that. When I saw lack of diversity, I wanted to speak up. When I saw there was a lack of areas that I felt passionate about, I would speak up because I wanted to contribute, and I knew that they needed help. So I wanted to bridge the gap and support. And through that, you build relationship, but they see you in action in a different way to want to get to know you, which permits you then to hence have indirect relationship and connection. So I would have in those many conversations where somebody would reach out to me, including actually some of the companies you just listed, and say, hey, like I got your contact because so-and-so, or like I've seen you speak in so-and-so, or I've worked with you with so-and-so in this context. And I've confirmed, like I know when I spoke with ABCX, other people, we all have the same opinion about you, which leads to the third piece is that I hope you all are showing up the same way you are, and not saying like, oh, that because this client is not going to pay me less, I'm going to do less work, and this client pays me more, I'm going to do more. Please don't do that. Words get around very fast, called the internet. And because people, I think, saw the consistent me, the only difference was more access and less. That affirmed whoever, whether big company or small company, when they got to decision making, they knew that we knew we could trust Monica, because no matter where we saw on stage, hanging out, having lunch, she's the same person. We know we can trust her, because if you're not consistent and you don't know who you are in that consistency, doesn't matter what you serve, whether big company or small company. How would people give you the money basically to ask for help?
Yeah. Very, very helpful. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you can't have different clients and different companies say different reviews and results. I love that, you practice consistency and just being true to who you are, and I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And thank you, Monica, for sharing that. And, you've been working on InnovatorsBox since 2015. Out of curiosity, like, what is next for you? Like, where do you see yourself the next couple of years?
Well, one thing that the pandemic really got me more excited about was stepping in deeper into vocalizing the importance of reskilling revolution, which is a term that the World Economic Forum has stated, noting that while creative thinking, innovative thinking are skills that we all say is important, none of us are formally trained or have access to learning. And for me, that means equity. It's not fair when those who are privileged, who can pay expensive workshops or even in companies to have access to learn how to be creative. It's not fair when, even as kids, like they have only certain, prep schools or like experiences to have access. At times, if we grow up, going back to the upbringing, if we don't have access to our surroundings or allies who show that this is how you can think of creativity, we start to grow up believing that we're not the creative one and we cannot. And I truly have always felt, which is where I knew my work has always been a global footprint thought as I was starting, because I started from diplomacy, that this had to be tackled. But the pandemic permitted, there's ways that you can start planting the seed through global access because everyone is reachable online. So it pushed me to really rechannel. Okay, it might not be that I'm like famous to be able to do the impact of scale that I thought I wanted to do, but what does like mini version of like early stage IB at this stage could do to make an impact, to make a dent? Because going back to your question of what, at the end of the day, what do I want to see? I would say InnovatorsBox and any of the work that we've done has made a difference in the right way. If somebody says, because of the work, because of something that we did, because of something we wrote or something that we said, helped one more person wake up and realize, you know what? Yeah, I'm really good at this and can do this and can do that. And it's not weird. Who says you got to be good in just one industry or one job? Like hopefully Brian and Maggie's not going to look at me weird because I said, I like sushi and chicken at the same time. She's going to be like, what? Like you like two different food? But we say that in jobs, which is so weird. Like, why are we making that a weird thing? Like everyone has so much talent that we can bring. Yes, we all have different expertise, but we have so much that we can expand upon. And when we cross collaborate and everyone wakes up more in color and know that they can be anyone and everything and expand and grow, and they got to still own up and got to do their part. It's not going to magically be given to their platter and say, here, just take it. You got to own up and work for it. Hustle still comes into nature. But that then I think would make me remind myself that, okay, we've done a good job. We've helped one more person, one more company know that they can be who they are, the colorful, limitless, not feeling like they can be in a box and feel fixed in a certain way. And so because of that, some of the initiatives that we have done more in the past few months is really expanding not only our services, an academy and online learning, but also launching our studios, which means not only our podcast, but making original music. And that's because, as weird as it might sound of why is a training company making music and work trying to tackle Hollywood, is because I truly am always inspired and getting new motivation and wisdom from entertainment and music. So if that's where we get inspiration every day, why aren't we having more players who actually want to empower a leadership culture and team development and reframe that, and not have these old wrong perceptions and limited beliefs of what it means to have a career? So that's the future place we're looking to dabble more.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like as human beings, we're just so multifaceted and versatile, like why put us inside a box and limit ourselves and our potential, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that, I think. And then I think on the other side of the spectrum, a lot of people are so versatile, they don't know like how to organize their thoughts, right? So I love your output and I love, just your perspective on everything. So Monica, we have one last question for you. And that is, if you could give one advice to an aspiring entrepreneur, which we have many in the Asian Hustle Network, what would that one advice be?